working to connect a region of over 600 mil bridges between our lands.
And you're watching ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam. Hello, Eliana. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Alma, and good afternoon to all of our viewers. I'm Eliana Sebastian, bringing news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi met with Taiwan's leaders in a visit to the island, defying a string of increasingly stark warnings and threats from China that have sent tensions between the world's two superpowers soaring. China's People's Liberation Army launched a series of joint military operations around the Taiwan island from Tuesday night. According to state television CCTV, the operations were carried out by the Army's Eastern Theater Command. Several U.S. warships were cruising in waters near Taiwan, according to U.S. military officials, amid Chinese anger over House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's controversial visit to the island Beijing claims as its territory. An ASEAN foreign ministers meeting in Cambodia looks set to be dominated by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. That has sparked rage in Beijing. And tensions are rising in China after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi landed in Taiwan. Beijing considers self-ruled Taiwan to be part of China, and Chinese officials have warned that they would regard Pelosi's visit as a major provocation. Take a look. The House Speaker was greeted by local officials, even hailed with a welcome message on Taiwan's tallest skyscraper. But across the narrow Taiwan Strait, China responded, announcing new live-fire military drills encircling Taiwan and warning that the U.S. would pay the price for undermining China's interests. To reduce tensions, Speaker Pelosi's flight path from Malaysia, the plane took a route that avoided the South China Sea, which Beijing claims before heading up the east coast of the Philippines. So many people were tracking the U.S. military plane, ferrying her on Flight Radar that the website said some users experienced outages. The capital's famous Taipei 101 skyscraper was illuminated with the words "Speaker Pelosi, thank you" on Tuesday night, in an hour before Pelosi's plane arrived. Pelosi isn't the first lawmaker to visit Taiwan this year, but she is the first House Speaker to do so in 25 years. Pelosi has a long history of riling Beijing over democracy and human rights. As a junior congresswoman just 2 years into her career, she was highly vocal about the June 4, 1989 Tiananmen crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators in Beijing. 2 years after the Tiananmen crackdown, she visited China with two other members of Congress on an official invitation. She irked her host by visiting the famed square, placing flowers at a martyr's memorial with a banner that read, "To those who died for democracy in China." President Joe Biden, normally a close ally of Pelosi, reportedly hoped in recent weeks to deter her trip to Taiwan to avoid stirring China's anger, while the U.S. is deeply embroiled in the Russia-Ukraine war. But Pelosi stuck to her guns. She wrote in the Washington Post that since her visit to Tiananmen Square, Beijing's abysmal human rights record and disregard for the rule of law continue as President Xi Jinping tightens his grip on power. Meanwhile, China's People's Liberation Army launched a series of joint military operations around the Taiwan island from Tuesday night, according to CCTV. The operations were carried out by the Army's Eastern Theater Command. This action is a solemn deterrent against the recent major escalation of the negative actions of the U.S. on the Taiwan issue and a serious warning to the Taiwan independence forces seeking independence, according to Colonel Shi Yi, spokesman for the Eastern Theater Command. In a statement, China's defense ministry said the PLA was on high alert and will launch a series of targeted military operations to counteract the situation, resolutely defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity, and resolutely thwart the interference of external forces and Taiwan independence secessionist schemes. In an unusual move, Chinese state media posted on Twitter a map showing 6 areas around Taiwan where it said the PLA would conduct drills, including live fire exercises from Thursday through Sunday.
China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Tuesday issued a statement on Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi's visit to China's Taiwan region. Let's take a look.
In response. Well, I think the world has seen very clearly that it is the United States that has been making the provocations which have led to the escalation of tensions in the Taiwan Strait. The United States should and must take all responsibility for that. The words you mentioned that were said by Secretary Blinken have mixed the black with white, and it is very telling, again, that some people in the United States hold on to a hegemonic mindset and an essentially extortionist logic. The U.S. essentially saying to the world that it can do anything it wants to make provocations, but others cannot oppose them or take self-defense measures. And recently, China has made clear our stern opposition to the potential visit to Taiwan by Pelosi, both in Beijing and Washington. Let me just make some additional points. First, any government institution in the United States, executive, legislative, and judicial alike, should follow the foreign policy recognized and committed to by the U.S. government. In 1979, the U.S. government clearly committed in the joint communique on establishment of diplomatic relations that the United States of America recognizes the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China. And within that context, the people of the United States will maintain cultural, commercial, and other unofficial relations with the people of Taiwan. The Congress is part of the U.S. government, and it should strictly abide by the foreign policy of the U.S. government. When the House Speaker, being the 3rd highest ranking figure in the U.S. government, flies on a U.S. military plane and make a provocative visit to the Taiwan region, it is certainly not an unofficial behavior. And secondly, the wrongful actions of certain politicians of the United States do not constitute a precedent, and still less should become an excuse for the U.S. to repeat its mistake on the question of Taiwan. And third, the One China principle is a universally recognized norm in international relations and a shared commitment of the international community. And it is on the basis of the One China principle that China has established diplomatic ties with the U.S. and 180 other countries. So this is a commitment the U.S. has made on the One China principle to China in the 3 joint communiques. So recently, the U.S. has claimed its commitment to the One China policy, but action-wise, it has been backtracking, blurring, and hollowing out the One China principle. It has been inserting the so-called TRA and the 6 assurances into its One China policy, which is unilaterally concocted and has never been recognized and has been firmly opposed to by China. The U.S. has also gone against its commitment on maintaining non-official ties with the Taiwan region. It has upgraded its level of contact with Taiwan. It has steadily increased arms sales to Taiwan. So on that, many people with insight have been very clear about this, domestically and internationally, and they have pointed out the danger of those actions. And after news came out about Pelosi's potential visit to Taiwan, many people, including those from the mainstream U.S. media and think tanks and the former political leaders of allies of the United States, have publicly said that under whatever reason, Pelosi's visit to Taiwan would be foolish, dangerous, and unnecessary. It would be a dangerous gamble, and it's hard to imagine anything more reckless and provocative than this. And if the U.S. side misjudges or mishandles the cross-strait situation, it will lead to disastrous consequences for the Taiwan region and even the security, prosperity, and order of the entire world. And my 4th point is that the U.S. has been following a strategy of using Taiwan to contain China and basically based on this strategy, it has supported and connived at Taiwan independence separatist forces and has made deliberate provocations against China on Taiwan. It has been pushing the envelope on China's red lines, and the U.S. and Taiwan have collaborated and made provocations first, whereas China has only been compelled to act out of self-defense.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Wednesday that her delegation had come to Taiwan in peace for the region after the visit enraged Beijing and set off a diplomatic firestorm. She defied a string of increasingly stark warnings and threats from China, which views Taiwan as its territory and had warned it would consider her visit a major provocation. Let's listen in.
When you say that I'm a good friend of Taiwan, I take that as a great compliment, but I receive it on behalf of my colleagues. We come in friendship. We thank you for your leadership. We want the world to recognize that. In our visits on congressional delegations, we have three purposes. One is security for our people, global security. Two is economics, to spread as much prosperity as possible. And three is governance.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February heightened fears in Taiwan that China may similarly follow through on its threats to annex the island. Beijing tries to keep the island isolated on the world stage and opposes countries having official exchanges with Taipei. The United States has said that its policy was unchanged towards Taiwan. This means support for its government while diplomatically recognizing Beijing over Taipei and opposing a formal independence declaration by Taiwan or a forceful takeover by China.
Meanwhile, several U.S. warships were cruising in waters near Taiwan since Tuesday, according to U.S. military officials, amid Chinese anger over House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island Beijing claims as its territory, as China announced it would hold live-fire military drills in the Taiwan Strait in response to Pelosi's visit. The U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet said the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan was operating in the Philippine Sea south of Taiwan. The U.S. Navy published images of the usually Japan-based Ronald Reagan conducting maneuvers with the cargo ship USS Carl Bashir on Sunday. The Ronald Reagan was accompanied by the USS Higgins, a destroyer that is part of its strike group. According to a U.S. Navy official on condition of anonymity, the aircraft carrier and its groups are on a routine operation in the Western Pacific, according to another official a U.S. official saying this on condition of anonymity. Additionally, the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli was also operating east of Taiwan, according to the U.S. Navy official, confirming reports from the U.S. Naval Institute, or USNI, a professional association with close ties to the Navy. The Ronald Reagan and the Tripoli are both carriers of the latest generation F-35 fighter jets, according to the USNI. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby told CNN that Washington would make sure Pelosi had a safe and secure visit. Meanwhile, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen said the island would not back down as a furious China geared up for military drills in retaliation for the visit of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that her delegation's visit to Taiwan was a show of support for the island. Take a look.
President, indeed, the people of Taiwan have proven to the world that with hope, courage, and determination, it is possible to build a peaceful and prosperous future, even in terms of the challenges you face. And now, more than ever, America's solidarity with Taiwan is crucial, and that is the message we are bringing here.
今年，俄罗斯入侵乌克兰，使台海安全成为全世界关注的另外一个焦点。民主台湾一旦受到侵略，整个印太地区的安全都会受到巨大的冲击。对持续且刻意升高的军事威胁，台湾 不会退缩，会坚定维护国家主权，坚守民主的防线。同时，也希望和全世界民主国家团结合作，共同维护民主的价值。
The Chinese military said it was on high alert and would launch a series of targeted military actions in response to the visit, and the drills will include long-range live ammunition shooting in the Taiwan Strait, which separates the island from mainland China and straddles vital shipping lanes. The zone of Chinese exercises will be within 20 kilometers of Taiwan's shoreline at some points, according to coordinates released by the Chinese military.
U.S. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen meet at the Presidential Palace in Taipei. Pelosi is given the Order of Propitious Clouds Garden by Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen for the recognition of her roles and contributions in promoting the relations between Taiwan and the United States. Let's take a look.
In recognition of Speaker Pelosi's extraordinary achievements, the government of the States of America is an outstanding stateswoman of remarkable erudition. President Tsai will now confer the Order of Propitious Clouds with special grand cordon upon Speaker Pelosi.
The medal is normally awarded to Taiwanese citizens for services to society, but may also be awarded to foreigners to promote diplomatic relationship, according to Taiwanese law. In her remarks on receiving the order, Pelosi said she was dedicated to supporting global peace and further economic collaboration with Taiwan. President Tsai said she was committed to working with the U.S. over security in the Taiwan Strait and the wider Indo-Pacific region, and vowed to deepen economic cooperation and supply chain resilience with the U.S. House said Tuesday that ally China had every right to take measures to protect its sovereignty and called U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's Taiwan visit a clear provocation. Let's listen in.
А сегодня мы имеем возможность практически в прямом эфире видеть, как осуществляется американская провокация. Поэтому мы рассматриваем возможный, это даже я не знаю, как назвать, возможный, потенциальный, не объявленно реализуемый визит спикера Палаты представителей Конгресса США Пелоси на Тайвань как очередное провокационное действие администрации США, желающее оказать дополнительное давление на Пекин.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Pelosi's visit was leading to an increase in tension in the region and accused Washington of choosing the path of confrontation. Moscow's assault on Ukraine has heightened fears that Beijing might similarly follow through on threats to annex its much smaller and outgunned neighbor.
The Department of Foreign Affairs has not received any requests from the U.S. to grant Speaker Nancy Pelosi clearance to use the Philippines as a transit point for her trip to Taiwan. The statement came earlier after reports circulated online that Pelosi would be taking off from Clark en route to Taiwan. Officials like Pelosi, the DFA spokesperson Teresita Daza said a request would be coursed through the DFA, which will then coordinate with other relevant offices. It said the U.S. and the Philippines adopt the One China policy, recognizing the People's Republic of China as the sole Chinese government. Although Pelosi's trip to Taiwan was not confirmed by officials, China has repeatedly warned the U.S. that pushing through with it would seriously undermine China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Southeast Asian foreign ministers will seek ways to help calm rising tensions over Taiwan at the regional talks today after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrived on the island and raging Beijing. Pelosi's dramatic late-night arrival in Taipei, defying threats of reprisals by China, looks set to dominate the meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, in Phnom Penh, which had been due to focus on the bloody crisis in Myanmar.
I តែដោយខ្ញុំបានជម្រាបជូនពាក់ព័ន្ធជាមួយនឹងរបៀបវារៈក៏ដូចជាចំណុចពិភាក្សាសំខាន់របស់រដ្ឋមន្ត្រីការបរទេសនៅក្នុងថ្ងៃនេះគឺមានប្រធានបទមួយពាក់ព័ន្ធជាមួយនឹងបញ្ហាតំបន់ហើយនិងបញ្ហាសកលខ្ញុំគិតថារដ្ឋមន្ត្រីការបរទេសក៏ប្រហែលជាយកឱកាសនេះដើម្បីធ្វើការពិភាក្សាគ្នាផ្លាស់ប្ដូរយោបល់ក៏ដូចជាស្វែងរកចំណុចរួមណាមួយដើម្បីឲ្យអាស៊ានអាចចូលរួមចំណែកក្នុងការសម្របសម្រួលក៏ដូចជាក្នុងការបញ្ចេញជាមតិយោបល់ដើម្បីធ្វើយ៉ាងណាឲ្យស្ថានភាពនៅកោះតៃវ៉ាន់មានស្ថានភាពមួយដែលស្ថិរភាពមិននាំទៅដល់ចំនួនមិននាំទៅដល់ការកើនឡើងនៃកម្ដៅនយោបាយរវាងភាគីពាក់ព័ន្ធទាំងអស់ពាក់ព័ន្ធជាមួយ we hope that concerned parties do not take actions that may deteriorate or escalate the tensions. And I don't think that the escalation of tensions will help them to solve the problems or, solve the differences. And I again emphasize the need, for all the concerned parties to reaffirm, the position to all of these basic principles, so that we can make sure that, Taiwan Strait will be a peaceful part of this region.
ASEAN spokesman Kung Phoa, Cambodia's deputy foreign minister, said the meeting would seek to calm the waters. He told reporters ministers would try to find ways the bloc could help so that the situation in Taiwan will be stable, that won't lead to a conflict and won't escalate the political heat between all concerned parties. The ministers, meeting face-to-face for the first time since the pandemic, are expected to lament the lack of progress on the bloc's 5-point consensus plan agreed upon last year as a way out of Myanmar's conflict. The country was plunged into violent turmoil when the military seized power last year, ousting Aung San Suu Kyi's civilian government, and the death toll from a junta crackdown has passed 2,100 according to local monitors. The Philippine government, meanwhile, appealed to the United States and China to be responsible actors in the region amid heightened tensions over the visit of U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. The statement came amid reports that Pelosi will visit Taiwan and would proceed with the trip without prior announcement. Take a look. The Philippines is closely monitoring developments in this regard. It is important for the U.S. and China to ensure continuing communication to avoid miscalculation and further escalation of tensions, according to DFA spokesperson Maria Teresita Daza in a text message to reporters. She said, "We trust that China and the United States will be responsible actors in the region." Pelosi is leading a congressional delegation to Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan to reaffirm Washington, D.C.'s unshakable commitment to our allies and friends in the region.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa new era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Gagawin ko ang lahat para makalapit sa kanya. Sinusundan ng tingin, ngunit malalim ang ibig sabihin. Hayaan mo muna ako magpakilala. Ako ang stylist assistant. Si Cha Ji. Sino ang gumawa nito? At bakit niya ginawa? Iparanas ko rin sa kanila kung anong tinaras ng papa ko. May tibay ng loob na harapin ang bukas na lihim.
Ikaw at ang mga magulang mo, may ginawa kayong kasalanan. Walang kalaban-laban na security guard ng hospital.
Ang pusong umiibig, umaapaw sa sakit, umiiyak, kumakapit at walang imig. Fatal Promise.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net 25.
Welcome back, and we continue with the news here on ASEAN in Focus, and we're still coming to you live from Manila in Vietnam with Eliana Sebastian. Now, back to the country, a magnitude 5.6 earthquake hit Davao Oriental early today, according to the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOLCS. The tectonic quake struck 51 kilometers southeast of the municipality of Manay at 3:19 a.m. It was 20 kilometers deep. Intensity 4 was felt in Manay, Tarragona, and Caraga, Davao Oriental. Intensity 3 was felt in the city of Mati and Baganga, Davao Oriental, while intensity 1 was reported in the city of Davao. Instrumental intensity 1 was recorded in Nabunturan, Davao de Oro, Malungon, Sarangani, and the city of Davao. Meanwhile, aftershocks are likely, while damage is not expected from this earthquake. Damage starts at intensity 6 based on PHIVOLCS scale.
The number of families affected by the magnitude 7 earthquake that rattled Abra and nearby northern Luzon provinces has climbed to 109,009, with the number of confirmed deaths now at 10. In its Wednesday update, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or the NDRRMC, said the affected families, equivalent to 421,728 persons, are residents of 1,133 barangays in the Ilocos, Cagayan Valley, and Cordillera regions. Of the 10 confirmed deaths, 9 are from the Cordillera region and 1 is from Ilocos. The number of injured from the tremors stands at 410, consisting of 374 from Cordillera, 34 from Ilocos, and 2 from Cagayan Valley. The NDRRMC also reported that they are no longer validating any casualties as of this time. Meanwhile, the earthquake has left about 19.7 million peso worth of damage to agricultural infrastructure, equipment, and machinery, all in Cordillera.
Meanwhile, China formally turned over 10 million pesos worth of rice to the Philippine government as aid for the victims of the magnitude 7 earthquake that hit northern Luzon last week. The Chinese Embassy in Manila, in partnership with the Philippine-Chinese Chamber of Commerce Industry, or PCCI, delivered the relief goods to the Department of Social Welfare and Development's National Resources Operations Center in Pasay City. In an interview, Embassy Deputy Chief of Mission Zhu Ziyong said the aid will be shipped immediately to the most affected area, particularly Abra province. He said, "My ambassador, 2 hours after the earthquake, already offered that China is ready to help. So 2 days later, we collected some relief goods worth 10 million pesos. Citing the victims, a dire need for food, water, tents, Zhu said more Chinese companies are expected to give donations. Ambassador Zhu said the 3.6 million pesos relief goods earlier announced by the Chinese Enterprises Philippines Association had been distributed.
Assessment of the impact of the magnitude 7 earthquake that rocked Abra and nearby areas in northern Luzon last week. The assessment would help support the country's response efforts. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is presently working with the UN Satellite Center in the production of satellite images to help humanitarian responders in prioritizing areas severely affected by the shock. Gustavo Gonzalez, UN Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator in the Philippines, said Tuesday. Gonzalez expressed solidarity with the victims of the July 27 quake and commended the government of the Philippines for their prompt reaction and the stewardship of responding to the needs of its constituents.
Further executions in Myanmar by the junta could force ASEAN to rethink its central 5-point plan to resolve the escalating civil conflict. That is according to Cambodia's Prime Minister Hun Sen, saying this at the opening ceremony of the 10-Country Association of Southeast Asian Nations meeting. Let's listen in.
ប៉ុន្តែសភាពការនៅពេលនេះប្រែប្រួលខ្លាំងដែលអាចនិយាយបានថាកាន់តែអាក្រក់ជាងមុនមានការព្រមព្រៀងឯកច្ឆន្ទ5ចំណុចទៅទៀតក្រោយពីការអនុវត្តទោសប្រហារជីវិតទៅលើសកម្មជនបកប្រឆាំង4រូបកម្ពុជាក៏ដូចជារដ្ឋសមាជិកអាស៊ានទាំងអស់ខកចិត្តនិងរន្ធត់យ៉ាងក្រៃលែងចំពោះការប្រហារជីវិតសកម្មជនបកប្រឆាំងទាំងនោះបើទោះជាខ្ញុំនិងថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំដទៃទៀតបានអំពាវនាវឲ្យមានការពិចារណាឡើងវិញអំពីការកាត់ទោសប្រហារជីវិតនេះដើម្បីជាប្រយោជន៍នៃកិច្ចសន្ទនានយោបាយសន្តិភាពនិងការបង្រួបបង្រួមជាតិក្នុងករណីមានអ្នកទោសដទៃទៀតដែលនឹងត្រូវកាត់ទោសប្រហារជីវិតយើងនឹងត្រូវបង្ខំចិត្តគិតគូរឡើងវិញអំពីតួនាទីរបស់យើងចំពោះការព្រមព្រៀងជាឯកច្ឆន្ទ5ចំណុចរបស់អាស៊ាន
Thank you. The 10-Country Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, which has spearheaded so far fruitless diplomatic efforts to restore peace, last week condemned the junta's execution of 4 prisoners. Myanmar has been in chaos since a putsch in February last year, and the death toll from the military's brutal crackdown on dissent has passed 2,100, according to a local monitoring group.
In other news, anybody is at risk of contracting the monkeypox viral disease, even if not engaged in sexual activities, an infectious disease expert said on Tuesday. During the Laging Handa public briefing, Dr. Ronjin Solante said, despite focus on the risk groups composed of gay, bisexuals, and males having sexual interaction with the same sex, they should not be discriminated against and stigmatized. Take a look.
Anybody or anyone is at risk of monkeypox, and especially with contact with a known monkeypox individual. So lahat tayo mag-iingat, no? And kailangan maghugas ng kamay, and at the same time, we still have to follow the health protocol, no? Pagsuot ng face mask, and of course, pagmatsyag, no? Sa mga kapaligiran kung sino may mga sintomas. And I think it's very important na kung may mga nagkaroon naman ng sintomas, they have to consult and arrange a consultation with their doctors, either in the government or in private hospitals or private clinics. For one, monkeypox is not considered as sexually transmitted infections. It's just that the current mode of transmission is through close intimate contact. Pag sinabing close intimate contact, kasama na dyan yung matagal ang pagsama sa isang room. Pangalawa, yung pwedeng naghalikan or pwedeng nagtalik, no? So, yun ang ano niyan. Pero hindi siya considered as sexually transmitted infection. Kadalasan dito is if one has the monkeypox, ang pinaka-common nito yung respiratory droplet, no? Pag nakipag-usap ka, yung talsik ng laway pwedeng pupunta sa mata mo or sa bibig mo with a very close contact and longer interaction. Pwede rin yung mahawakan mo yung mga skin lesions, no? Especially yung mga fresh and yung may mga tubig-tubig na mga skin lesions. Mahawakan mo yan at hawak ka rin sa bibig mo or sa mata mo, pwedeng papasok yan or kung meron kang open wound. Yung pangatlong mode of transmission yan, Aljo, is yung mga damit, yung mga gamit ng pasyente na mayroong monkeypox, including yung mga beddings, pwedeng doon tumitira ang virus at pag nahawakan mo yan, and again, pag hinahawakan mo yung bibig mo, mata, or meron kang open wound, pwede mo makuha ang monkeypox. No? So ito yung mga common mode of transmission ng monkeypox. So halimbawa, meron tayong pasyente sa bahay or suspect ng monkeypox. Lahat ng mga gamit yan, bago mo hawakan, magsuot ka ng gloves. No? Maghugas ng kamay, magsuot ng gloves, and then ilagay mo siya sa tamang lagayan na hindi ma-access at hindi magalaw ng ibang tao. And then you have to coordinate with the sanitary na magkukuha niya na this is a highly infectious na mga gamit, no? So, importante na meron kang tinatawag na contact precaution, ang paggamit ng gloves at paghugas ng kamay. Yung virus na to, pwedeng tumatagal doon sa mga damit kung saan yung monkeypox na sinusuot niya or yung mga beddings, no? But hindi pa natin alam kung are this virus na nakikita sa mga damit will be considered as highly transmissible, especially pag tumatagal na, no? Kasi alam naman natin na pag mga inanimate object, ang virus hindi ganoon katagal, no? na ano sila, namamatay sila.
ASEAN in Focus will be right back. Please stay tuned.
We cannot deny that the value of our money now can afford much less than it could a year ago. Maraming mga bagay ang nakaapekto sa ating ekonomiya at ang karamihan sa atin ay nagulat dahil tayo ay hindi handa. How do we stretch our budget and still save a few? Kapos na nga ang pera, mag-i-invest pa ba? Perhaps it's timely for us to discuss how we can mitigate the effects of the economic crunch and still be able to tide over the wave of financial uncertainties by learning how to grow our money.
If you live simply, then what you need to save will be a smaller amount. But if you live grand, of course, mas malaki rin yung kailangan mong ipunin. It's not what you make, it's what you save.
Open for business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Asawa mo pa rin ako. At kailangan mo ako respetuhin.
At may linaw sa kabila ng hindi pagkakaunawaan.
Kung iniisip mong katumbas ng pagmamahal ang pananakit sa babae, mali yan. Ayusin natin ang problema ng pamilya natin, pero hindi sa harap ng ibang tao, okay?
Pwede tayong mabuhay sa lungkot at pagdurusa o pipiliin nating maging masaya sa panahon meron pa tayo.
Mama! Mama!
Ayoko umiyak. Sasama ang pakiramdam ko kapag umiyak ako. Malulungkot ako. Ano, baby? Tignan mo, binigyan na tayo ng magandang baby para alagaan at mahalin, di ba?
May lungkot na mapapawi sa mga ngiti ng pagmamahal.
Ang sabi ng lola ko, magmahal ka at nang hindi ka matakot sa lungkot.
Gusto kong mabuhay ng tulad mo. Ang mabuhay ng masaya at parang wala nang bukas.
At sa huli, ang nagmamahal ng tunay, siya ang may karamay.
Binibigay ko sa iyo ang puso.
Anak ko!
Palabra de Amor.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net 25.
Welcome back, and we're still coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam with Eliana Sebastian. Go ahead, Eliana.
The United Nations said 2 men convicted of trafficking drugs were put to death in Singapore on Tuesday, voicing alarm at further planned executions. We deplore the hanging today of 2 men in Singapore and are deeply troubled by the planned execution of 2 others on August 5. UN Rights Office spokeswoman Liz Russell said in a statement, "We urge the Singapore authorities to halt all scheduled executions," said Russell. "We also call on the government of Singapore to end the use of mandatory death sentences for drug offenses, commute all death sentences to a sentence of imprisonment, and immediately put in place a moratorium on all executions with a view to abolishing the death penalty." A Malaysian and Singaporean were hanged at Changi Prison after being convicted in May 2015 of drug trafficking, and their appeals subsequently rejected, he said. 2 other men, Abdul Rahim bin Shapi and Ong So Ping, are expected to be executed on Friday after the latter's family was notified of his fate on July 29. They were both convicted in 2018 of possessing drugs for trafficking, and their sentences upheld on appeal. After a hiatus of more than 2 years, the city-state resumed executions in March with the hanging of a Singaporean drug trafficker. The execution in April of Malaysian trafficker Najentran K. Darmalingam sparked international outrage due to concerns that he was mentally disabled. After a hiatus of more than 2 years, the city-state resumed executions in March with the hanging of a Singaporean drug trafficker. The execution in April of Malaysian trafficker Najentran K. Darmalingam sparked international outrage due to concerns that he was mentally disabled.
Just hours after the Abra provincial government declared a state of calamity and requested relief and other assistance, the Iglesia Ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, responded to help residents of the quake-stricken province. Take a look.
Ngayon lang kami nakaranas ng ganito. Lindol po. May naranasan po kami noong 1990, malakas, pero mas malakas na ngayon po. Truck na dumating, na umiyak ako sa takot ko. Kala namin katapusan na po.
Yung anak ko kasi ngayon nahihilo. Pag lumilindol, tumatakbo. Parang na-trauma na po. Kailangan po namin ng tulong.
Konting tulong lang po.
Sana po makarating dito yung tulong ninyo. Matulungan namin yung mga kabaranggayan namin po, lalo na kaming mahihirap po.
Napakabilis po ng pagtugon ng kapatid na Eduardo V. Manalo nang malaman po nila ang sitwasyon o kalagayan po namin dito sa Abra. Nang paparating po ang mga truck na may mga dalang mga pagkain, mga gamot at iba pa po, napakaligaya po, napakasaya po ng mga kapatid.
Ang bilang po ng goodwill bags ay mahigit 10,000 na lubhang kailangan po ng mga kapatid ngayon dito sa aming distrito. Narito rin po sa gabing ito ang mga destinado kasama ang mga kapatid para kunin ang mga nasabing goodwill bags. Bukas ay dadalhin nila ito sa mga sambahayan na nasalanta ng lindol.
Napakalaking bagay ang ipinadala ng pamamahala na tulong para sa aming distrito sapagkat marami po silang matutulungan.
Wala pa po kaming natatanggap na galing sa gobyerno o kahit anong ahensya mula nung lumindol po. Dito lang po sa INC Ngayon po, malaking tulong po sa amin yun na binigay niyo sa amin, lalong-lalo na yung tubig kasi ang tubig namin hindi maganda.
Sobrang saya po kasi napakabilis pong dumating po sa amin yung paglingap po sa amin. Maraming salamat po ka Eduardo po sa agarang paglingap po sa amin po.
Sa pinakamamahal po naming kapatid na Eduardo V. Manalo at sa lahat ng mga kapatid sa buong mundo, maraming salamat po!
On July 29, trucks bearing 10,000 bags containing rice, canned goods, medicine, and drinking water arrived after an almost 10-hour travel from a repacking area of the INC in Quezon City. The relief packages were transferred to smaller vehicles for transport to different areas the next day. On July 30, the INC volunteers handed out the relief items to the calamity victims in the municipalities of Bangued, Peñarubia, and Danglas. The INC stressed that the outreach activity continues to remote barangays or villages where many of the 7-magnitude quake victims reside. The July 27 earthquake struck the mountainous province of Abra, triggering landslides and the collapse of structures affecting thousands. The Iglesia Ni Cristo extends assistance to communities affected by calamities. INC members in more than 160 countries and territories strive to help their fellow men adhering to God's command to do, quote, to do good to those who need it, written in Proverbs 3:27, Good News Translation. And that's it for ASEAN in Focus for today. Thank you very much, Eliana, for keeping me company and helping me out here today on ASEAN in Focus.
Thank you so much, Alma, and thank you to all of our viewers for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. This is Eliana Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, and we live in extraordinary times.
Thank you, Eliana. We'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place, here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times.